majority of our identities are wrapped up in what we do. And I have a story a little bit later on about how I kind of got rid of that. But for the sake of answering your question, I am a mentor, I am a community organizer, I'm a facilitator, I'm a mom, I'm an anarchist, I'm also an alternative education advocate, and I'm somebody who works with, and I'm an author, international speaker, and somebody who works with teens and cares deeply about the mental health of adolescents. Oh,
Perfect.
and
So
where you
go
can find
ahead.
me. Sorry,
Throw it
guys.
in. Throw it in. Everyone, where can you find her? Lainie, where can they find you?
So I'm really easy to find online. My name is, like I said, Lainie Liberti. If you just Google that, you'll find me in a million places. But for brevity, you can find me. My moniker is at Lainie. So Lainie. I've always used Lainie for, gosh, I don't know, 30 years. It's been a long time since I've been using that moniker. So Lainie on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll find me there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Everyone, we were talking about how she's one of the few people that actually shared a Twitter account. And she says she's had it since 1901. That's how long she's had it. Okay. No, I'm joking. She's had it for a number of years, not that long, guys. So take us through the genesis, Lainie, of how did you get started in all of this? And what was your journey like for you to discover that, hey, I actually want to do this?
Yeah. Okay. So currently what my passion is and my purpose in life is working with teens, supporting their mental health. And that was kind of a long road to get there. I'm going to give you just sort of the condensed version, but it's all relevant. It's all relevant to the story. So I'm going to go back to 2008. 2008, I'm from Los Angeles. I was living there as a single parent. And at the time, my son was 9 years old. And I also owned a business. My business was a branding agency. It was focused on serving green eco companies and nonprofits. And it was one of the first specialty boutique agencies in Los Angeles that did this. And so I was quite well known in Los Angeles. And it was at the time when green marketing was just coming to the scene. And I was quite critical and did a lot of investigation into greenwashing and marketing and that sort of thing. And I also had an amazing roster of clientele, and my business was quite successful. I worked for 18 years in branding and marketing and advertising and all different aspects. In the last 8 of those years, I ran my agency. But near the end of 2008, the economy crashed in California. And I knew at the end of the year, I would not be bringing back my staff in 2009. I knew that wasn't going to happen because my clients, nonprofits, they were the first hit during the economy crash. Now, at the same time, being a single parent, the words that I heard echoed over and over from my son's mouth were, "Mom, you're always working. You're never spending any time with me." And that cut into my heart like a jagged knife. And it was the hardest thing to hear. And part of the sort of cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing, number one, was the creating of consumerism, which was something I started to really reject. It was a manipulation. And even though I felt like I was using my talents for good instead of evil, working for nonprofits and green eco companies, it still was leading into the whole consumerist model. And that really kind of sat really, really bad with me. And I was somebody who was teaching media literacy to my young son. But as he would say to me, "Mom, you're always working," I felt like I'm chasing the American dream. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm providing for my family. I'm running a business. So I was successful at the things I was doing. Yet I was not happy. And even though my son had everything he ever wanted because we had the financial means, he wasn't happy. And so that opportunity to take a really hard look at the life we were leading was part of our reaction to this, I was going to say pandemic. It wasn't about it. It was the economy crashing, but you can use the outer world, circumstances to change your life situation. And for me, that was the catalyst. So one night, it was an October, cool night in Los Angeles. And I remember after looking at the books and looking over at my son, it was like 9 p.m. He's still in the office with me playing video games on the computer. And I looked over at him and I said, his name is Miro. And I said, Miro, what do you think we just get rid of all this stuff and go have an adventure? And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, one question. And I'm like, what? He's like, do I have to go to school? And I'm like, no. He's like, I'm in. And so that was the launch of this life-changing journey that we embarked on. And I'm talking to you today from Mexico. We have since made our home here in Mexico. He's here too, although we don't live together because he's now 24. But we ended up traveling together and living nomadically since 2020, and then 2020, we were actually here in Mexico, and so we stayed. So I don't consider us living nomadically anymore, but we are still living outside of our home country. And the course of the 1 year of travel, which turned into, we're about ready to start on our 15th year, was life-changing, transformational, and living together with a 9-10-year-old and traveling, we absolutely had to have spectacular strategy, tools, and scaffolding for being sane, right? Because we live a conventional life and we didn't spend a whole lot of time together. And then here we are 24/7 together. And we needed to have some of these tools that we used in order to make our lives livable. And part of that was accountability, high emotional intelligence, a lot of conversation about what was happening in the internal worlds, and our agreement to be in partnership. And partnership led to this whole transformation in my parenting and healing a lot of the childhood traumas that I experienced and actually have written about since. And the exposure to those childhood traumas throughout my younger adulthood, 20s and 30s, I spent a good portion of my time working with tools to self-direct my own healing. And so that became a part of the tool set that I brought in. And so we used a lot of the things that I was practicing, like, the work by Byron Katie and really shadow work and really getting into understanding our patterns and belief systems. And even as we started to travel to more than 40 countries, we started to recognize worldviews and the American-centric perspectives that we left the country with, and how that was affecting the way that we were viewing our lives. And all of that, I'm glossing over, but, my son is now 24, but from 9-10 years old till now, we lived out of our home country and living a very unconventional life and traveling, living nomadically, just the two of us, nobody else to rely on, just the two of us, lots of challenges to overcome. We had to figure out how we were going to support ourselves for those, 13, 14 years. We had to figure out the manner in which we wanted to live and experience our lives. We had to figure out how we were going to address education. And community as well. And all of that stuff led into the stuff that I'm doing now. So I'll leave it there for now and let you jump
I
in.
remember absolutely. I remember a time where I went to Bali, Indonesia in 2019. And I love the experience just because one, the Canadian dollar was a 1 to $10,000 ratio. So I was a millionaire in Bali, right?
Yeah.
And two, as we discussed earlier, they have so much seafood and I love seafood. And three, it was a slower paced culture. And I felt like I belonged because the culture is so inviting. And you began to realize that, hey, this Western view of certain things isn't for everyone, even though we grew up in it, right? So I could totally appreciate where you're coming from, where you're like, hey, how about we do this? Son, come on, let's go do this. And you're trying to figure it out. Granted, my experience is not like your experience, but how was it raising a son in that type of environment where it's like you're still trying to figure it out? He's still young, but you want to make sure that this lifestyle is the best for the both of you.
Right. Well, one of the things that I didn't have a word for before this was as part of my, somebody who grew up with trauma in my childhood, part of my trauma response was hyper independence. And I always had this attitude like, I can do it on my own. I could do this. I could do this. I could do this. And I had a very functioning, I still have a very functioning working brain, and it allowed me to learn whatever I wanted to learn. And so becoming an autodidactic was one of the things that I was really proud of. I taught myself so many things in my professional life and so many things in my personal life that served me because I believed that I can do whatever I wanted on my own. And again, trauma response, that was one that served me. In many respects, other respects, I could see how it was a deterrent or a detriment to part of my development. But the knowing that I could learn whatever I needed to learn or wanted to learn has been a powerful superpower that I've brought with me through life. And I needed to learn about psychological teenage adolescent development. I needed to learn about the neurobiological development. I needed to learn everything I could about parenting. And after studying all of these things for many, many, many years, I mean, I was pretty well read with attachment parenting and a lot of the different parenting modalities before I gave birth because I wanted to be prepared, and I'm doing this on my own, and I really wanted to make sure that I did this right. And part of the reason why I spent a good portion of my 20s and 30s trying to heal a lot of the trauma and limiting beliefs that I had and patterns that were not serving me was because I wanted to be a really good parent. And the learning about the neurobiology, the development, the psychological evolution development of teenagers, historical development, all of that stuff served me in terms of being able to support my son. And that became a huge undertaking in terms of not supporting my son, but a huge undertaking in terms of being the best parent for a teenager as possible. I had to know why he was being a jerk. I had to know what the shutdowns meant. I had to know how to give space. I had to know how to parent in partnership. And a lot of the parenting modalities that I read about sounded great up to a certain point, but being somebody who's an anarchist, I still felt there was this not a level power, not power structure, but not a level playing field in terms of power. Most parents practice childism, where the belief is the child doesn't know anything, or the child doesn't have agency or sovereignty, and they cannot give consent. And I believe the exact opposite. I think that they're born whole and they look to their parents to be their partner and facilitator, not the person who shapes and forms them. The world around them will shape and form them by their experiences. And they need to have somebody who is safe and secure and in their corner and attached to, in order to go through the challenges of life. And so it was a totally flip in terms of, using some of these preordained modalities like conscious parenting, peaceful parenting, gentle parenting. A lot of those were great up to a point, but they still had an agenda to change the behavior of the child for the convenience of the parent. And that was not how I wanted to parent. I wanted him to be completely empowered to be who he is and feel like he was trusted in his decisions, even the bad decisions. And together we face the natural consequences of those things together. Although, because if you raise somebody in partnership and with trust, guess what? They don't make bad decisions really, because they know they're supported. There's no reason to rebel, right?
Yeah, because when I hear you say that, it puts me in a situation that I kind of reflect on my childhood where I didn't have my mother and my father, right? I was raised by my grandmother, and this is like old school, right? And it makes you realize that if you put someone in a situation to figure it out, they will figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? Versus you saying that you need to be this type of person, this way, more rigid. And if I understand correctly, your approach was more open, where it's like the child is already complete. They just need assistance navigating versus me telling them, hey, do this, do this, do this. Would that be accurate description of your approach?
Yeah, beautiful. We lived in partnership. And if you think about the partnerships that you've had in your life, maybe it's not parent-child partnership, maybe it's romantic partnership or business partnership. You all come with different skill sets and you all perform different activities or duties or whatever, because you're different people. And the honoring of the differences is a huge part of being active in partnership parenting. I know that my son is not capable of doing certain things and I can do those things, and that's the part that I bring to the relationship and the partnership. And it doesn't mean that everybody is exactly the same. It just means that they are the unique you that they bring to the partnership. And it's a wonderful way to learn. It's a wonderful way to live life. It's a wonderful way to raise a child. And it's a wonderful way to empower another human being so that they can figure out who the heck they are and what lights them up. And let's face it, I know you've spoken to thousands of people probably on your podcast, right? It takes people sometimes a while to step into their power. And sometimes it happens midlife, sometimes it happens in early, adulthood, but rarely does it happen in adolescence, because adolescence, the teen years are so restrictive for so many. People are being told what to study, where to study, what to do, what's important to them, instead of having the space and freedom to figure that out. So that wasn't part of my son's, the being told wasn't part of his experience. And instead, we were able to navigate the world together, living by the rules that we chose. And, it was very empowering. And I really feel like he's benefited, he's actualized, because he knows he's trusted and what he thinks and feels and perceives is important. And it's honored. And just because I have more years doesn't mean I'm the boss.
So let me ask you, because this is the first time, and I'll be very transparent, that I've heard of this type of approach, but it's interesting because it's something, at least to me on my end, that we kind of give to adults more than children.
Sure.
right? Not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, but it's just a different approach. But what I like about it, it's unapologetic, meaning that this is the way I'm raising my household and it's working.
Yeah.
That's the key. It is working. So when you pointed earlier to trauma that you experience, the type of household that you have now, do you believe that you would have benefited from that type of parenting structure and reduced the trauma you've gone through as a child?
Absolutely. Part of not having a secure attachment in my own childhood means I had a lot that I had to repair in my own neurobiology. I had a lot of pattern beliefs. The belief systems really mostly come from our childhood and from our environment. Um, and it's not always the most beneficial to have these belief systems throughout adulthood. However, we store these belief systems in our subconscious mind as pattern thinking. And every time we go back to a thought about self or about the world based on an experience we had in our childhood, that runs in the background, and that pattern thinking acts as if it's a truth. So our mind doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction. It just knows what it repetitively thinks. And the majority of our subconscious thinking is put in place by a brain, the version of me that was much younger and could not developmentally pull apart and integrate some of the things that were in my field, in my experience, because I just didn't have the developmental, know-how. I was a child. And so of course I thought, I'm being yelled at constantly, something's wrong with me. Of course I believe that I'm too much for people or not enough. Of course, I believe that it's dangerous to trust people. And those are patterns of thinking that I had to reprogram, at least be aware of when they come up, when I see the patterns playing out in my own adult relationships. And that was my catalyst for wanting to dig into not only integrating these traumas, doing my own shadow work, but understanding that I will have these pattern belief systems until the day I die. They are a part of who I am. And when somebody talks about quote unquote healing traumas, I think it's a misnomer. It's learning to live and to integrate them and understand how you tick. So when I get triggered by my partner now, it's not because, it could be because he did something, but it primarily is because it touches on an old belief system where the subconscious starts playing it. And it in my case, I will either withdraw, or I will fight, or I will, do something that's not very productive to a connection, because the belief is that connections are dangerous, that kind of relationship can be difficult for me, and my subconscious is trying to keep me safe. Now, am I ever going to get rid of that? Never. I will always live with that. And so understanding how to make peace with my brain, my patterning, my belief system, and create space for me not to be those things, but to be the witness of those things as it happens in my own life, was one of those powerful journeys that I took into my own. And then again, what better word can we use but healing? It's not healing to get rid of, but healing to make sense of who you are.
For those who are watching this wonderful interview that we have with Lainie, please subscribe, follow, and share. And we will be back for more incredible interviews. Stay